Okay, well, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Reagan Garber, and I am the president of We Care TLC. And I have the privilege of joining you today to talk about this subject of loneliness that I was kind of inspired by. I think it's important to point out that I am not a clinician and I am not giving medical advice. But I was raised by a nurse, so I have lots of my own fun facts. But today, and Jason, you could go ahead and move. We're going to really talk about what loneliness is. And at least in my mind, I never thought of loneliness as something that could impact your health. But in fact, it can impact your health. But there are ways to manage it. So we'll talk about what loneliness is first, and all definitions are around the same. The interesting thing is it's you have social isolation, which can produce loneliness, but loneliness itself is really the self-perceived gap between the social connections that you want and where you feel that you are missing or lacking in those social connections. So really it's all about you as an individual and where you perceive yourself to be. So that's why you can be lonely in a crowd if you are really feeling that you're not connecting or that you're missing those connections. That can either be while you're by yourself or when you're around a group of friends even. And even though it can be tied to genetics, that's not the only factor in this, and it's not tied to any gender, religion, color, or economic status. Essentially, anyone can feel lonely. As we know, as studies have shown, the older you get, the more likely you are to feel that you're lonely. And I always kind of like to see how the U.S. stacks up against other countries, just in terms of anything health related. It's interesting to look at because culture does influence these any kind of impacts to your health. And so US is kind of right in the middle of the pack, and it follows the same trajectory. As you get older, the tendency is to feel more loneliness. So next. And the interesting thing, so this is a timely topic, and it's not a coincidence that we're talking about loneliness right now. And the second wave of COVID with the Delta variant is that last year we all really had the opportunity to feel lonely because we were, suddenly taken out of our normal routines. If we were really involved in sports or in groups or in our community, all of that just changed overnight, essentially. And we were spending more time with our immediate family, or if you didn't have, the immediate family, you were spending a lot of time by yourself. And so a recent study that was published this year, that was conducted last year, of about 950 Americans, that 25% said that they felt more lonely essentially all the time, almost all the time or frequently, which is a lot, right? So, but then the thing is that we saw the last slide, the older you get, the more likely you are to feel lonely. But the interesting thing here is last year, 61% of those aged 18 to 25 reported high levels of loneliness. So it's not just an age thing. It can be across all ages, and it could definitely be tied to the impact that COVID had in the quarantines. So when you look at loneliness, right, we just sometimes consider that just a feeling, but feelings and how you feel about things could most definitely impact your health. And so this was really a very interesting data set for me, because when you look at the lack or perceived lack of social relationships, which is loneliness, or the feelings of loneliness, how that stacks up against smoking, alcohol, physical inactivity and obesity, it's significant. So loneliness is and can be a significant impact to your health, especially if they're coupled with any of the other smoking or physical inactivity or obesity. So, you know, a lot of times these things may be tied together, but when you have one or more, you know, that does not mean good things for your health. So next. So some of the, you know, some of the ways that loneliness can manifest itself in your health is anxiety. So when you feel loneliness, you can become more anxious about it, more anxious about your life, and then that can lead to stress. And then also loneliness has been tied to a functional decline. So, you know, how you get around or what you're able to physically do. And cardiovascular disease it's been shown to, as you saw in the slide before, you know, even with this, we know smoking is tied to cardiovascular disease, and you know, diabetes certainly impacts cardiovascular health. So, you know, all of those things tie together. And then there's also been shown a correlation between loneliness and stroke and diabetes. And the other thing is if you already have conditions such as cancer, having you know, severe loneliness has been shown to make those conditions worse. So really the takeaway here is that loneliness impacts your health, and it's important. And so, you know, you don't want to necessarily disregard if you are feeling lonely, or, you know, everybody feels lonely sometimes, but if you notice that you're feeling lonely frequently and, you know, it's not really going away, what can you do, right? And so next slide, please. So some of the things that you can do are really the overall thing is to make a plan. You want to come at this strategically and kind of in a neutral way, and so, you know, some of the things that you can do, especially, you know, we all have to be careful nowadays, but as you know, we're not as isolated as we were. Except if, you know, you have to quarantine, definitely still continue to do so, but there's things that you could do in person and virtually. So you can, even if you're virtually, you can connect with friends, or you can, you know, plan to have lunch dates with your friends, or just, you know, touching base over the phone or over FaceTime, joining different clubs, associations. One of the things I remember when I had my first child, my son, I had an extreme, you know, bout of loneliness. And so one of the things that I did was I joined, I like to eat. And so I joined a brunch group through Meetup. And you know, every month we would go and have a brunch somewhere, and I would just drive by myself, and I would meet up, and you know, I was by far the youngest in the crowd, but I met all of these wonderful women, and they really became friends, and that was really crucial to kind of pulling me out of that lonely, kind of depressed feeling I was having after the birth of my son, and the isolation that I felt. So, you know, those kind of just maybe taking an interest, and, you know, Facebook communities, there's all sorts of Facebook communities. I belong to a lot of plant groups. So there's just things to kind of, you know, whatever your interests are, different ways to connect with people, and focusing on those positive things, and that connection will start to shift the energy there. Volunteering, you know, if you making, you know, focusing on something else rather than the feeling that, you know, you're missing these connections. Sometimes when you focus on helping other people, that might help. And then there is a very high correlation between participating in creative pursuits and the positive impacts that has on loneliness. So, you know, even if that's not something that you've traditionally done, or if you're just like, art's not my thing, maybe if you are, you know, kind of stuck in a cycle of loneliness, then maybe it's just time to give it a shot. You know, they always have the wine and paint things. They have you know, they have things virtually, they have things in person. Sometimes the local library has art classes, and I know different where I live, the city hall has some monthly art classes. So connect with your local resources and giving a shot. I'm right now learning to play the bass guitar because I've always wanted to learn how to play the bass guitar. Really at a beginning level, but like it's just something to kind of take my mind off of things. And meditation, there's all sorts of studies on meditation and just the benefits it has on everything. Stress, anxiety, focus, happiness, and you know, potentially loneliness. So meditation has been shown to decrease stress and anxiety, which are you know, some of the, as we saw in the earlier slide, and some of the effects of loneliness. And there's one more. And really, when I said earlier at the beginning of this slide to make a plan, that is really, really important, because it's making the plan. Because a lot of times when you're feeling, you know, depressed or lonely, the tendency could be just to, you know, you can feel lethargic about things. So having that plan, having that accountability, that's definitely something that the clinicians and your providers and your health center can help you with. So you can, you know, if you're in a cycle of loneliness, then, you know, reach out to them, make an appointment, tell them what's going on, and they can help you create a plan, whether it consists of these things or anything else that you guys may come up with, and then they can be your accountability partner and help you through that. So, so that, I believe, is, yeah. So we'll take any questions, but if you have any questions after this, you can email them to virtualforum@wecaretlc.com. And does anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand. There's a little emoji thing up at the top of your Teams bar. Oh, or you can place the questions in chat too. Yes, thank you, Jason. I forget about that. Okay, well, if there are no questions at this time, we'll conclude this session, this Lunch and Learn, and we will distribute it out for reference for later. All right, thank you.